Hi, everybody. My beloved kitten here wanted to say hello as I was creating this, coming on to say hello. She's here with us. So you get a little kitty porn during this conversation for as long as she likes. Um, so, wow, I had one of the most amazing Akashic Record readings today. Um, and it was one of the biggest that I've ever had. And in fact, this week I had two of these really huge Akashic Record readings. Um, and it was both of these readings were beyond the personal of the soul who was coming to get the reading. They were really huge, really collective. And so I just want to share the story and how it came through my perceptions with you, because it was very, very interesting, specifically for the ladies, for the goddesses out there. So when I started to tune in, and I'll start by saying that this person, this woman came on, and I met her today. I never met her before. I met her, and she shared with me that when she was a young child, she had a lot of psychic gifts, but they were frightening to her. And so she asked Spirit to take them away. And so she closed them off. And she became a scientist. And after a traumatic incident about 3 years ago in her life, her gifts turned back on. And excuse me, her gifts turned back on. And she's been experiencing, for the past 3 years, she's been experiencing this really huge awakening process in her own being. She's experiencing telepathy with her spirit guides. She's experiencing a knowingness, a transparency through her being as other people speak. She says that she can hear the energy of the words. She can hear or feel the emotions of the person as they're speaking. Certain words stand out to her with meaning that give her data about the person that's speaking. So she shared a bunch of these awakening processes, or her gifts awakening, her non-physical, multidimensional perceptions that are awakening in her being. And that was the purpose for her reaching out for an Akashic Record reading, because she wanted to sort of like open more of that, understand more of that. So we talked about some resources that could help her out and support her. And then we went into the reading. And as I said, this is the second one this week that has been freaking huge. And so yeah. All right, so I'm just gonna tell you the reading. So so it starts off with, so after making the connection, after saying the prayers, after setting the sacred space, after raising the vibration so that we're in this sort of like equally high vibrational space, right? And making the connection and doing all of that stuff. The first thing that I receive or perceive from her is this essence of flowers, this flower essence that's coming in as like a scent, right? So it's like her aura has the scent of flowers, like as if you had I think you can see my cat's hair in the in the video. That's silly. Anyways, so her aura has the scent of flowers. So like if you had lilacs in a room and you walked in, or a hyacinth in the room and you walked in and you smelled the room, that smelled like the flower essence, right? Her presence, her soul, her spirit had this essence of flowers. And so spirit started talking to me about like that she was a goddess energy, that she had goddess energy to her, and it was likened to Persephone, right? And so when I'm when I'm working with people, friends, and even just people out in the world or clients, I can attune to and notice, right, if they have angelic energy, feels very, very different than goddess energy. If they have animal energy, right, like animal totem energy, like wolf energy or bear energy, or trickster energy, that's a common one out there in the world, trickster energy. I have some family members with that. So so this energy that this woman had was goddess energy, very different than angelic energy. And how it was explained in this particular reading, particularly in the difference between goddess energy and angelic energy. Angelic energy, it has this sort of like constancy to it. It's consistent. It doesn't fluctuate. It's angelic energy. My mother has angelic energy. I have a best friend who has angelic energy. But the goddess energy is different. The goddess energy fluctuates. The goddess energy has cycles to it. Right, Keek? The goddess energy has cycles. And the cycles are like birth, growth, harvest, creation. And then it moves oftentimes into decay and dissolution, right? Death, and then hibernation, and then rebirth. Okay, so the goddess energy is more about creation into form, bringing things into form, growing things. So it's got cycles to it. So she had this goddess energy, and they were sharing with me that it was like Persephone. And so Persephone is the goddess of Demeter. Demeter is the earth goddess, the goddess of the grain. Demeter is the divine feminine energy that creates the earth to grow, all the plants to grow. What do you have to say? All the plants to grow on the earth, and all of the thriving of the earth is the Demeter energy. And there's other goddess names for this kinds of energy as well, other names. But so Demeter is that energy. Her daughter Persephone, as a young girl, was like goddess of the flowers. And she would always be out in the field picking the flowers and frolicking with the butterflies and all of that sort of thing. And then the god of the underworld, Hades, took a liking to Persephone because she was so beautiful and so innocent. He opened up a cavern in the earth. Persephone falls in, goes into the underworld, and then agrees, or is tricked, depending on the mythology, right, is to be in the underworld for 6 months of the year. So she's on the surface of the earth for 6 months, frolicking with the flowers, and for 6 months of the year, she's in the underworld, assisting souls, I believe, to travel across the river to Hades, to the underworld. So Persephone. During the months of the year that she is in the underworld, Demeter causes the earth to be barren. So that's the winter, right? So the winter season is when Persephone is in the underworld. When we think about this in our life, the mythology in accordance, like symbolically with our life, the underworld is that time, that period of time in our life when we go into darkness, after the death of something or after the trauma of something, we go into a dark period where we are grieving the loss of what has been, and integrating the knowledge, the wisdom that we've acquired. And we go into the darkness to go into the voidal space of and receive healing, rest, restoration, right? But also to receive what's next. What's the next rebirthing? We go into the formless realm to receive the downloads, the inspirations of what it is that is next. Okay, Kitty porn's done. What's next to be created in our lives? So that's the underworld, the dark periods of our lives, the voidal space. And then we come back up, renewed, transformed with the wisdom of what we've learned, so that our next creation will be for the next evolution of our soul, the next evolution of our soul's learning and growth. Okay. So that's the Persephone story in a nutshell. And, there's details to it, and maybe I didn't get it all right, but you get the gist. So this woman is holding Persephone goddess energy. And then I tap in, right? And then I tap in deeper, and Spirit tells me, this isn't going to be a normal reading. We're not going to do like one particular experience where she had heart closure in her life. This is much, much bigger than that. And so we need you to prepare her. So we prepare her by saying, look, you've got to stay in this bigger aspect of yourself. You have to, while we do this reading, you have got to tap into your angels that are holding your space, tap into your higher self, and be this goddess self for all of the parts of the self that are going to come forward to be reunited into the heart, because it's going to be a big reading. It's not just a little reading. And I think that this may have been the very first time that this has ever happened to me. So then Spirit takes me in and says to me, which I share with her, that this story, this lifetime that she's experienced, this Persephone story that she's experienced, this lifetime where she's experienced, which was in her childhood, where she was young and she was innocent and she was open to the divine in all, the oneness in all of her gifts were open. She had the telepathy. She saw the magic in the flowers. She saw the energy in the flowers, and she closed it down. She went into darkness. She minimalized herself. She led this normal life until the traumatic event happened, where that normal life ceased to be, and she was catapulted into a new life. So she went from the innocent young Persephone into the darkness, and she came back out and is now re-emerging into her gifts and into her connection with the spiritual realm and the connection with the divinity of all things. This is in her individual soul's life here on earth, in that personality identity. But what Spirit said to me is that lifetime that she experienced, this lifetime that she experienced, was actually a microcosm of the macrocosm of her soul, of her spirit. And it brought me into this. I mean, it was crazy. It was insane. It brought me into singing her soul's name to her, her large soul's name to her. And it told me this story of her connection to her greater soul, her greater spirit was like a goddess on earth. It was like when she walked, flowers would spring up from beneath her feet if she wished it. Like, she had this connection to the spiritual realm where she could manifest in form. Firstly, she could manifest, this goddess spirit being she existed in the light realm, and she could manifest into form, into the physical realm at will, for the purpose of teaching and communing with the early human inhabitants of this planet. Okay, so she would come down and she would be their guide. She was a star being. She was a huge, enormous star being of light, but she could materialize into form, and she would materialize into the form of a goddess, a human goddess, very large. And where she walked, the flowers would bloom. And they said she's like the Native American corn woman. She's like the Native American corn woman, this goddess, this star being. And she was not only the Native American corn woman, but many of the different goddesses that came to the earth, many of the different deities that came to the earth to assist in the raising of the human consciousness on the planet. So all of the different cultures had their own version of the corn woman. And so that's what her essence was connected to. It was wild, totally wild. Never, ever. I would never assume, my personality would never assume to create this kind of a story and give it to somebody like, this is who you are. I mean, it's just absurd to me, right? But it's not absurd because I didn't make it up. This is what was coming through spirit. So the long story short of this crazy story is that this being decided, she became so in love with humanity. She became so in love with the earth. She had this experience of unconditional love. Also, she knew that ultimately it would all come around full circle. So what this being did was she incarnated into human form, but into many different human forms. Okay, so she's so big, so huge, so vast that she actually separated her consciousness into many individual human forms. She became human. She allowed herself to go into the babies and to be raised by humans with the intention of being fully awake on this planet, with the intention of remembering her gifts and remembering who she is. And so she came into human form as an educator in many different communities. And she specifically taught the women about the divine feminine and the magic of the divine feminine and the magic of the earth and the cycles of the earth and the planting cycles of the earth and the worshiping of the divine feminine life force energy on earth. And so it was a time of great prosperity, great abundance. And it was a time where the humans were mostly matriarchal and worshipped the goddess in its many, many different forms, and her many, many different forms. And so this is like prehistory stuff, right? So way, way, way back when there were tribes and they worshiped the divine feminine. And so she was an initiator of the sacred ceremonies of women, the cycles of the moon, and how to worship the goddess, divine feminine, through the priestesses. So she was an educator of priestesses. What happened, right, is that because she came into human form, she seeded human form with this divine feminine consciousness. She's not the only one. This being, and I'm not talking about the person that I'm giving the reading to, okay? I'm not talking about this is the person that I'm giving the reading to. I'm talking about this is her big, gigantic God presence body. So this being incarnates into human form and incarnates into the women of the earth, and then, as we do, reproduces, right? And so became a stream of many offsprings of women. And so this divine feminine energy, this star being, braided her essence into many cultures through the divine feminine lineage. When the world turned, when the energy turned, when the cosmos turned, and the patriarchy was born, right? So let me reverse. During the matriarchy, there was an imbalance of power. There was an imbalance of power during the matriarchy where the women held the power in the matriarchy and the men did not. Okay, it was not always equal. So the women held the power, and then during the turn of the wheel, the patriarchy was born, and then the patriarchy held the power and the women did not. Okay, and so during this cycle that has occurred, the goddess went from this amazing being, this energy of exaltation, into a subservient role. And in many cases, all around the world, the goddess has been degraded by power structures, distortions, and all kinds of war, violence, rape, all of the abuse that the divine feminine has suffered through and survived. Yeah. I'm not saying anything about men or the equality or the I'm not saying anything about the suffering of anybody, except that this has just been occurred, and it hasn't occurred in one way or another, higher or lower or anything. So it's not an argument about that. This is just a story. So the story is that the matriarchy turned this goddess being that came to earth, separated herself, taught humanity about intuition, connecting to guidance, telepathy, spiritual knowledge, taught the women. The matriarchy held power, and then that dynamic changed, and the patriarchy has been holding power for the last however many eons. But what's happening now is that it's not a matriarchy that's coming back, but the divine feminine is rising. And what is being birthed now and being intended now is for a balance between the masculine and the feminine, the divine masculine, divine feminine. So the divine feminine rising, the divine masculine rising, so that we can clear the distortions of both of these streams of consciousness that are within each of us, regardless of our gender. So in this reading, what we received was this energy of this large being that seeded itself into many, many beings, into the divine feminine, has suffered, gone through the suffering, gone through the dark nights of the imbalance of power, both the powerful and the powerless, and is now coming out of that dark night, coming out of the underworld to rise again and reconnect herself with herself. So all of the little bits, all of the pieces of themselves that have separated as individual beings, that believe themselves to be individual beings, or have separated into soul fragments, there was this collecting in this story, in this session, there was this collecting of all of these separate parts of her being that have experienced trauma, of the divine feminine trauma or feminine trauma over the course of her soul lineage, right? So it was this sort of like big sweep today where they were just all gathered up into her heart. So many of pieces were gathered up into her heart, gone through forgiveness processes, angels assisting, all the works. But and then we moved forward into the agreement breaking process, right? Which was primarily about breaking agreements about making oneself small in order to fit in, forgetting who one is, forgetting the divinity within oneself, closing off the gifts, yada, yada, yada. So all of that was going on. But the story itself, what Spirit was really emphasizing throughout this session, this journey, was that the divine feminine is rising, and that the parts of the self that this being has separated into are the many pieces of the sisterhood. And there may be different flavors, different streams of consciousness within the sisterhood. But the sisterhood is being reawakened, and it's being called to gather again and come back into its heart, which is loving forgiveness and acceptance of each other as women, and wholeness, reclaiming our wholeness as women individually and collectively. And so for her, it was about rising up into a total acceptance of self, receiving these parts of the self back, because for this person that I read for, her divine mission that she's getting glimpses of, but that's coming through very loud for me, is that she holds this pillar of reconnection of the divine feminine and of the sisterhood and all of the parts of her greater oversoul that have embodied here on earth. And so it's about magnetizing and drawing them back in groups, leading them back into wholeness, so that collectively our divine feminine nature can be reborn, right? Come up out of the underworld, be reborn in our connection to our oneness with our own divinity and within all things. And it was so beautiful that I feel that as I'm sharing this, I was so excited to share this. And now I'm like, as I finish, I feel like I'm uncertain about whether the potency of it has been transmitted or if it just sounds like platitudes. I don't know. But anyways, I'm going to offer this up. I'm just going to share it as Spirit has pulsed me to share it and let it go. So I hope that it serves. I welcome and enjoy your comments. And I was just very, very excited about this amazing opening that I was honored to facilitate and witness. And also, amazingly, is that what we were taught in this Akashic Record Counselor of Light training system is that each person that comes to you for a reading is bringing back parts of yourself to you. And so I'm so super honored to have been able to hold the space and facilitate this reading for this person. And also in this sort of like humble acknowledgement of the calling back of the parts of myself that are in, that have been up until now perhaps distrusting of reconnecting fully with humanity and reconnecting fully with the sisterhood in the oneness of the divinity that we are, right? Because let's face it, it's pretty harsh out there. So in this sharing, I offer this up in my vulnerability, loving the human tribe, trusting and faithing in the divine, and letting it go, surrendering, hoping it serves. Blessing, 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 blessings. Blessed be, blessed be, blessed be. If you're interested in looking into your own Akasha, there's some links in the description below.